Some content or topics discussed could trigger a past anxiety or be sensitive or disturbing to listen to or view. Please view and listen with caution.
All right, welcome back to Walking Tall. We are so excited once again to be with you folks, and I, as always, am excited to be with my two co-hosts, Todd Blylevin and Dr. Vanetta LaRosa. If you were with us last time, we got to hang out, catch up, talk a lot about mental health, and we are so excited this week to do the same. Before we welcome her on, Angela DiMarco, she's a New York resident and has two kids of her own, ages 6 and 19, and she's also the co-host of the Going Commando with Angela and Dana podcast. It's a show they created to really just talk about authenticity and celebrate who they are and the authentic other, the perspective of others, if you will. And those two women truly understand that all of us really want to just connect with something real, and they pride themselves on being raw and going commando, if you will, for the sake of humanity. And Angela is just such an inspiration to all of us. She's been clean and sober now for 14 years. Hasn't picked up a drink through some pretty heavy life stuff, which we'll hear about. And like me, going through a divorce, but now she's working on moving forward in peace and contentment in her life. And her mission is to provide hope of a beautiful life to all of those who struggle with addiction, claiming if she can do it, anybody can. So Todd, if you don't mind, let's let Angela on and we'll get to know her.
Yeah,
My favorite part, ding dong. Hi, Angela. How are you? Welcome to the show. We are so excited to have you on, of course, and you will not yet get to hear, but I did my best job of introducing you, and I'm certainly not as eloquent as you are. So if you don't mind, please, the floor is yours. Introduce our listeners and viewers to who you are, what you're doing, why you're here, all the things that make Angela DiMarco who she is.
Oh my gosh, I don't think we have enough time, but I will go through as quickly as possible. So thank you for whatever you said. I appreciate it. I just want to say, Todd, Chris, Vanetta, like this is such a great thing that you guys are doing. Allowing people to share their stories really helps provide hope and inspiration, because we're so far removed with social media. We're so far removed. Everybody thinks that the problem is inside, which is part of my story, and I'll tell that in a second. But you think you're the only one. You think you're the only one who's gone through all of this like stuff. But, as my old sponsor used to say, you're not special. You're not unique. Like we're just a garden variety drunk. Like this is what happens. So hi, everybody. Thank you for listening. My name is Angela DiMarco. I am here to talk about my sober journey and the things that I'm doing. So I'm just gonna jump right into it and go into like my story. And there's a couple things I want to say. As I speak about the experiences from my past, I speak very, very concrete with very little emotion because I've healed much of it. And I don't want people to think that I'm breezing over like, oh, I had a miscarriage. Woohoo! It's not like that. It's just that to move the story along, I want to make sure that that's understood, that I don't dwell anymore because I don't exist in that space anymore. That's why I'm healed and I'm recovered and I'm here. So I have 14 years sober. My sober date's March 9th, 2010. Whoop, whoop, snaps. And really, for me, so I have a lot of, I will never speak ill of AA. AA saved my life, Alcoholics Anonymous. It was exactly what I needed at the time. I am now in more of a spiritual place, not spiritual like religious, but more spiritual, just like big picture, seeing the world, having faith, having hope, having love, having light. And I think that's the whole point of when we have substance abuse and we have things like alcohol wasn't the problem, cocaine was not the problem, promiscuity was not the problem, I was the problem. And those were the things that I used to help me cope with life that I couldn't find life manageable. I started drinking when I was, and I'm not going to go into a whole drunk-a-log, but just to give you a picture, I started drinking when I was like 13. I started doing drugs with my dad when I was like 17, 18. And the minute I actually, 18, because I suffered a loss in my family. Like one of the only people in my family that paid attention to me died all of a sudden. And I And Chris will appreciate this. I was like this, that was my introduction to Pearl Jam, because I went to a dive bar in Long Beach because I was so miserable and upset, and I played Alive in Black on this jukebox over and over and over again, and it spoke to my soul, and it became like my best friend and music, and that's the whole thing. But I went back to college, and my big sister was like, "You want a bong hit?" I'm like, "What's a bong?" And there we go. So I pretty much was the kind of person who would like, someone would hand me something, I would take it and be like, "What are we doing tonight?" Like I had no, like, I had no self-worth. I had no lack of consequences. I had no feeling of consequences. So from 18 to about 35, I was literally like balls to the wall, just like wasted the whole time. Um, and wasted in a sense that like I still was responsible, still was a career woman. I was a functional drunk, as you'll hear people say.
Mm.
Um, but I was close to 9/11, so I had severe PTSD from that. And more
Wow.
deaths, more things that like happened in my life that I just kept running away from. I remember walking down the aisle for a big princess wedding to this guy who was 14 years my senior, and I wasn't attracted to him, didn't like him, walking down the aisle going, "Oh God, I got to kiss that." And faking being upset on stage. Like I remember wiping a fake tear, being like, "This is so emotional." Like I don't know what I was thinking in my right mind. I look back and I'm like, I had to have Maddie and all that stuff. But so I was someone who partied all the time, someone who was also somewhat of a chameleon. So whoever I was with was what I was doing. And 2008 was probably the beginning of my bottom. I have a timer here, so I don't go totally over time, but now that's why I keep looking down, because I could go on. So 2008, that June, I told my ex I wanted to leave him, and he beat the shit out of me. He almost killed me. He had his hands around my neck. I remember seeing black. Maddie was almost 3, crying for her milk, and I was like, "Oh my God, I'm gonna die. This is how it ends, right here." And I didn't. And then we spent like a summer. I was terrified of him. Um, and we spent a summer trying to reconcile, and whatever. And then by September, I finally broke it off with him. And I just went like, I don't know. I was just lost. I was scared. He would stalk me. It was crazy. He yada yada yada. He wound up fighting me for custody. He was so controlling and so manipulative and so miserable that he fought me for custody of our child, who was a young girl. He had no family in Brooklyn. I had a whole family of support, but what happened was we had a forensic psychiatrist, and we had to do an evaluation, a personality evaluation. Vanetta, you probably know about this test, 800 something questions, yes or no. And I was extremely honest because that's who I am. Like I was never truly honest with myself, but I was truly honest with this test. And when I went back to get my results, I had my last night of drinking, which was March 8th, Alice in Chains concert in the city. Total awesome, epic, last drunk ever, because I bar crawled my way there. It was a tequila night. It was insane. There were fights. It was awesome. It was everything you could think of a great drunken night should be. And then the next day, I had this boyfriend, and we were like on again, off again, on again, off again, and got into a blowout fight. And he said to me, I'm an alcoholic. I think you are too. If we have any chance of sticking together, I think we should stop drinking. And I'm like, I'll do that for you. You're right. I don't have a problem, but you have a problem for sure, for sure, for sure. Right. So then like 3 days in of not coming home and having my glass of wine, just 3 days, I call him and I'm like, God, I really want to drink. He's like, just don't drink. I'm like, okay, duh. So then there are these 20 questions that you can go on. I think it's on Alcoholics Anonymous's website. They're out there. It's like, do you have a drinking problem? Go through this evaluation. So I'm like hiding, like I'm looking at porn. I'm looking on my computer and I'm like answering these questions, like from my family. I don't want anybody to see me. And I was like, yes, yeah, yes, 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 yes. And it gets to the bottom, and it's like, if you answered yes to 2 or more of these questions, you have a severe problem with alcohol. And I was like, oh my God. So I realized at that point, I call him and I'm like, hey, can we like go to a meeting or something? Like, don't meetings exist? And he was like, oh yeah, I've been to millions. And I'm like, wait, what? Like totally didn't even know I was dating this guy who is an on again, off again drunk. Anyway, um, I like within like a week of not having my solution, because life sucked. My ex fought me for custody and won. I was very honest. The forensic psychiatrist had said to me, I think you have a problem with alcohol. I'm like, you're right. I think I'm stop drinking. And that was used against me to get my daughter. So I didn't have my daughter. And it was just, I was so broken. I was so broken. So he takes me to a meeting. It's all crazy. I go to my second meeting and by myself, and it's like, spooky night. And he's like, just go to the church basement. I'm on the phone with him. He's like, just go to the church basement. I'm like, this is like a scary movie. You'd never go to the basement, And there's like this little like bulb light, and I smell coffee. I'm like, I think there's a meeting down there. So I walk into this scary dungeon in Williston Park, and there's like 5 people, 1 woman, and 4 guys. I don't even know how the meeting started, but I just raised my hand and I was like, I need fucking help. I'm sorry if I can curse. Sorry. Okay. I was like, I need help. I can't. I don't know what's going on. And this woman, she's a big woman, she turns around, she looks at me, she goes, huh, talking to you after the meeting. And I was like, okay. She's like, just sit there and be quiet. I'm like, okay. So I have no idea what happened. But afterwards, she walks up to me and she's like, you can be sober. If you do this one thing, I can get you sober. You can change your life. And she said, I want you to read a passage on page 417. She gave me a Alcoholics Anonymous, the big book. 417, she circled a passage, which is a really, really good passage if anybody wants to know. And then she put her phone number in the front. She goes, you're going to read this, you're going to call me, and then you're going to get sober. And I was like, okay.
Wow.
And then the rest is yeah.
Well, listen, I mean, there's so much there to unpack, Angela. Like I could understand, like whether it's losing a loved one, to divorce, to abuse, to so much that goes on in people's lives, as you heard and as we all know, we're not special, right? We just have experiences, and it's important for us to potentially find others like I did in Todd, that had similar experiences, and AA is no different than that. But Dr. LaRosa, I'm so excited to hear what you have to say, because Angela is so forward about her addiction and her drug use, but it's pretty evident to me, what she was masking or some of the experiences she was trying to numb. But what is this, the medical, the brain behind all this?
Well, first of all, my allergies are bothering me, so sorry, my voice cracked there. Your vulnerability and honesty and just pure candid nature is something I just don't know that I've really ever seen before to this extent. And you should be so proud of your ability to do that, because these are the things that help others. And these are the things that people need to hear. And if they can't live out loud right now for whatever reason in their lives that's preventing them from doing that, by seeing people like you, I do believe that it's going to add to their arsenal of strength to be able to do that in the future. And that is a really important part of the healing process. So you're so refreshing, and you're just so appreciated, for coming here and talking about all this. And this, this is a situation I truly believe that people need to become more educated about, because we all have, obviously we have different genetic makeups, right? And we have a genotype and a phenotype. We have what's inherited in our DNA, and then what is expressed, right? And the research is very, very, very clear that reward seeking and cognitive impulsive behavior is different based on your genotype, and it connects very closely to the dopamine that is activated in our limbic system, right? So there are some people with certain genetic genotypes that when they engage, when they use drugs, they're more prone to addictive behaviors because they have a hypodopaminergic response. So that just means that the drugs or the alcohol or the substances that they take are hyper activated,
Mhm.
and the dopamine pathways in the brain are ultra energized, and so they feel extraordinary reward from these substances, thereby making addiction a lot easier for them to get and a lot harder for them to get over. So, there is a neurological underpinning behind this. This really, it's not just about people choosing these behaviors and lifestyle and throwing all caution to the wind with everyone else in their life. It's really not. So for people that misinterpret the behavior of addicts, they really should know that they're starting from a place that makes it a lot more difficult, and the journey to sobriety is a really tough one. And the strength and resilience that you have put forth to get there is admirable. I had an uncle who passed away at 52 due to alcohol. His liver failed. He was a really accomplished guy. He was my best friend. He was an awesome guy. And he went in and out of rehab multiple times. And I lived the struggle with him. Us Italians, we all live together, right? So
Yeah.
I told you two would hit it off. You two Italian women from New York. Are you kidding? But Dr.
Forget
LaRosa,
about it.
yeah, forget
Sorry.
about it, right? But I wanted to say, thank you for pulling that all together, right? And putting the science behind it is so important, because I, like you, have had addiction in my family. I'm proud to say my dad is 32 years sober. When I was 10, he literally checked himself into rehab on New Year's Day and never looked back. Quit drugs, alcohol, and cigarettes all in the same day. So I understand those struggles, right? And never did I consider my dad to be like a party animal, like attention seeking, right? Like now we know differently that there is a problem and there is a science behind it. And Todd, now hearing what Dr. LaRosa said, I don't know where your mind went, but my mind went to sports, right? And I think, as athletes, baseball players, we like to win. We like the thrill of excitement. We like the dopamine and the competition. And, seeing what we see in the game sometimes, seeing guys drinking beer after, in the clubhouse until they're drunk, or all of these types of addictions, it makes sense to me. So that's where my mind went. I don't know about yours, but this conversation is really starting to put a lot together for me.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, Angela, like Dr. LaRosa said, thank you for sharing and just being so vulnerable. The way you told the story of, you fast forwarded through all, like, probably some huge, crazy moments in your life that were extremely difficult. Times you probably woke up going, "Oh my God, I wish I would die. Like, this is horrible." And then you rinse, repeat, and just keep doing it over and over. And to be so vulnerable too, and share the story of how, that hardship probably absolutely slammed you down in that courtroom, and, losing your daughter to, in terms of that custody battle piece, and the self-realization of everything. And one of the things that I found interesting about what you said was you called out this page 417, and I pulled it up. And if you don't mind, I'd like to read it, because I think it's
Please.
really interesting. And I think that, Chris, like what you just brought up with, we all party, right? I remember going out, like drinking way too much for way too long in a long, and looking back and going, man, if I wouldn't have done that, I probably maybe would have done this.
How many times is I'm never drinking again?
Yeah,
Like,
oh, totally.
After 12 vodka Red Bulls, right? Like, come on.
Oh God, that's something that wasn't around when my drinking days. So, and
Yeah.
picklebacks wasn't a
All right,
thing.
Todd,
so
you
I'm
were going to
kinda
read this.
missed
I'm
out.
excited to hear.
Sorry.
I'm excited
Yeah.
to hear.
Picklebacks.
No, so page 417, it's acceptance is the key. And it says, it's a paragraph, so give me a minute here, but it says, acceptance is the answer to all of my life's problems today. When I am disturbed, it is because I find some person, place, thing, or situation, some fact of my life unacceptable to me, and I can find no serenity until I accept that person, place, thing, or situation as being exactly the way it is supposed to be at this moment. Nothing, absolutely nothing happens in God's world by mistake. Until I could accept my alcoholism, I could not stay sober unless I accept my life completely on my life's terms. I cannot be happy. I need to concentrate not so much on what needs to be changed in the world as on what needs to be changed in me and in my attitudes. And I think that's like such a self-proclaiming piece. Like, I'm taking acceptability. You called it out. It's my fault. It's not the drug. It's not someone that gave it to me. It's me. So how did you, I mean, you go through this, you read this chapter, and at what point, like, did it all of a sudden, I guess here's my question. You go through 3 days, yeah, let me get a drink. A lot of people probably do that. I don't know. I have any experience in that.
Mhm.
Thankfully I've been able to kind of maybe stop before it got to that point.
Yeah.
But at what point did you all of a sudden go, okay, I'm good. I'm on this highway now. It's 1 year,
Yesterday, no,
it's
I'm
2 years, it's 3 years. You know what I mean? Yeah. Is it always just a day by day thing?
No,
Yeah.
so there's another thing I want to point out for those who are newly sober, those who are thinking about trying to get off the wagon. I'm talking from gambling, from any kind of behavior that you are doing right now that is not serving you. This is not just necessarily about the drugs, cigarettes, shopping, food. It's all of that is all wrapped under the same hood. Basically, it's like all under the same hood. I am in a place now, and I don't want this to seem like I'm in a place now where I am living a beautiful existence. I have no desire to reach for a drink. I want to be fully present in my life now. But when I first got sober, so it took maybe, I think I went for a physical probably about 8 weeks in. And I told my doctor I stopped drinking 8 weeks ago. So, oh, you're probably feeling pretty good right now because your liver now is healing itself. And I was like, oh, that's cool. I didn't know. I started to lose weight because I was drinking so much. I lost like 20 pounds, like in the first 3 months. That was cool. But without the solution, without something to take me away from myself, because this was the kicker. This was the statement. It wasn't that paragraph. I was in so much pain. I was in so much pain because I had nowhere to go, nowhere to escape from me. And when my sponsor handed me this thing and told me to read this, and then I texted her and she cried because nobody does it. Nobody follows through. That's the thing. Like when you're newly sober, you're really insecure. You're really in your own world. You think nobody can help you. You don't ask for help. I called her. She's like, do you know how many times I've given out my number? Do you know how many people have called back? Like 5%. 5%. And those 5% stay sober because you're saying, I'm willing to be so uncomfortable. I'm going to text this person, this total stranger who told me they want to help me. And that's all they want to do. She had told me when we had that conversation after, you can change your entire life. You do not need to be the person that you were. You can become the person God intended you to be. And I knew deep, deep, deep down inside that I was meant for greatness, that I was a light. I was a light. There's a line from Pearl Jam song. The light comes from within our hopes and desires. And I always wanted to have a beautiful family, have a beautiful life. I had this dream of being, a billboard in Times Square. That was my dream back then. It's not my dream right now. But I knew that I was destined for a life of other than I was living. So when she told me I can be someone totally different, that's what I held on to. And I'm going to tell you, 3 months in, I remember I was at this boyfriend's house because we were now sober together. I was listening to like I think a Tool song, Chris. I think I had
Now
Tool
you know I like
playing,
her.
and I'm laying on the floor, and I just cried so deeply. I wanted to dig myself under the floorboards because I hated every aspect of my life. Everything that I had done, I had shame, I had guilt, I hated everything about myself. I couldn't look in the mirror. She was like, go look in the mirror and tell yourself you love you. I couldn't. I could not look in the mirror and tell myself I love me. Now I'm like, oh my God, Angela, you look great today. Like it's a totally different thing. But that I was so broken, and then just going into AA and the experience, the slow experience of sharing my story, of people actually caring about what I had to say, those little things, all little pieces, little things like erased the stuff. Like it started to compound in a positive way as opposed to where I'd been. But I was a big ball of shame.
No, and you know what, Angela, I'm so glad how you just described your sponsor and that mentor of yours and that guiding light to get you to that, right? And I don't know how much you know our story or Todd or my story, but you know, very similarly, like I received a text message out of the blue from Todd and saying, "Hey, here's who I am, here's what I've been through, and I can help you," right?
Mhm.
And it takes those people in our lives to really step out of their comfort zone and make themselves vulnerable, them, you know, to really help others. And you know, I want to just ask you quickly, like, you know, are you still close to that sponsor? You know, what is the, and you know, seeing as though we are a mental health focused, you know, outfit here, and you said it a little bit, we talked at times about shame and guilt and all those things internally, but what role did maybe therapy have, or you know, what type of mental health issues did this addiction create for you as well?
So awesome, awesome, awesome. Okay, so I am no longer close with Jennifer. I know that I could call her in a second and she'd be there for me. But what happened was, as I found myself, first I got the addiction out of my system. Then I created the behaviors that created the person that I am today. And as that happens, there's transition through people. So I have changed many people, places, and things. I'm going through a divorce, so I'm like now in like my second relationship post being sober, and it's just so life changes, and some people stay with us and they're there for a moment, reason, season. I had a therapist. So I on top of the alcoholism and drug addiction and promiscuity and stuff, I had severe anger. I had to get anger management. I had PTSD while I was still drinking. They gave us free therapy because I was down at 9/11 when it happened. So there was free therapy down there. So that really helped me with my PTSD. Like, I couldn't walk to the site. So every time I had a session, it was down on Broadway, right by that church. And I would walk one city block, like one little block, like a cube. I'd walk one square closer until the end of therapy. And I was able to like touch the fence and look at the site. So that was really cool. I had a therapist, Joe. He was very,
Time
very,
out, Todd. You
yeah.
like how she just drops in? Well, I had this whole PTSD episode from 9/11, and I'm like, what? You know, I mean, that's a whole nother show in itself. And, you know, Todd and I and Dr. LaRosa, you know, of course, we talk a lot about Angela, and I'll let you get back to it. But PTSD is a huge part of our story and how we came together. So
Mm,
we certainly can relate. I
mm,
remember, you know, at times and after my experience having to drive downtown Highland Park, losing my breath, right?
yeah,
Like, or
yeah.
falling into tears or not wanting to be in the room, you know. And Todd, you talked about being back in Las Vegas at times already. Like, it's just we relate, right? We so
Yeah.
relate, and that's a whole nother
100%.
conversation in itself. I didn't want to cut you off, but I had to let you know that you're not alone in that as well. That journey is tough, and you know, we're so proud of you as well for being able to touch that fence. So,
Thank you.
all
Thank
right,
you.
go
Thank
ahead.
you. Okay. So, in and of itself, though, if you think about it, all of the years that I drank, I did have PTSD. I still do from the things that I had done to myself. A case in point, I went to a party on Saturday. I've got a new boyfriend. He's amazing. He's a psychotherapist. It's like perfect for me. And I've got Dana on one side and my psychotherapist boyfriend on the
Maybe
other.
that's what I need to find. Vanetta, you got any single friends?
Yes, seriously, it is amazing because we're like, let's analyze that. I'm like, yes. So we were going to a party on Saturday, and I think I told you this, Chris. I was nervous because he's the first person I've been with that's not sober. So I was like, am I going to be safe in this environment with somebody who's drinking? And and I had to like really talk it. Thankfully, we talked it through the whole time, and he was checked on me the whole time. It was great. But the PTSD is in everything that is trauma inducing. I have PTSD from my abusive stepfather when I was 3. It's all still there. But that's the whole point of all of it, is that we have substance abuse and we blame the alcohol, and we honestly we blame the genetics, like it's not our fault, it's outside of us, right? But if we look at why we picked up in the first place, we may have that like, I'm sure my dad is a drug addict, so of course I'm sure it's genetic in the sense that it's like awesome, that's why I love doing cocaine, but
Well, you know what's funny, and you know, here's what we said, and Dr. LaRosa, I want to hear what you have to say about that, but because then we want to get into all the cool things you're doing now, Angela, as well. But what I was going to say is, even right there, your vulnerability, right? Dr. LaRosa and Todd and I both admire you so much. your forwardness, your bluntness, your candor with who you were and all the things you've done still to this day provide hurdles for you. And what I heard in your story about Saturday with your new, boyfriend and this party you were at was hesitation, right? You're still so confident, but yet, like us all, we have these doubts. No different than I have in going into public spaces with large crowds or things like that. You just have to find the ways to get through it. And I'm so glad you were able to get through that party and you were supported. But Dr. LaRosa, Angela said some things I know that probably put your spidey senses up. So I want to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, well, there's a huge difference between using information for, for making excuses and using it for understanding, because knowledge is power, right? And, for example, there's always an interplay with emotions, behavioral responses, rewards to those behaviors, and genetics, right? And to the extent that we respond to different reward circuits in our brain is somewhat genetic. So everybody starts off from a different foundational perspective, right? If you will, internally and externally. There are people that have support systems in their family and they don't grow up with abuse, neglect, or trauma. And then there are those that do. And so when you combine all of these factors, it really highlights the uniqueness of each human and their journey. And I always say, to anyone that I'm working with, your brain is something that you have to understand so that you can wrangle it. You're telling your brain, look, I understand that this is the direction that you want to go, but you and I are going to work together. We're going to go in this direction, So having an active conversation with your brain, it's really, it's a visual that's kind of amusing, but, at the same time, it not only works for children, it really does work for adults. If there are children with ADHD, that we can talk about. We're envisioning a road, and this road is long and boring. It's a long dirt road and it's boring and it's sunny and it's hot and it's aggravating. And then you see a little road over here that goes deep into the trees, into the forest. And that's so interesting. And you really want to go in that direction, but you have to stay on the road. You have to stay on the road for a period of time until you reach a goal. And then you could go back and enjoy yourself down that untraveled path, if you will. And by understanding that their brain is the same way, their brain wants to connect to everything in their world that's interesting at that moment. And as they're doing that, they're not learning and absorbing the information that they really need to be successful in their lives, right? And so we don't want to take that beautiful brain power away from them, because children with ADHD have a wonderful capacity to enjoy life and to just experience wonderful things all around them. We don't want to take that away, but we want to help them understand how to be proactive and pro-social and help themselves to be successful in society as well. So, with whatever mental or emotional situation that people are going through, there's always an element of understanding that's going to help the person achieve their goals. So it's just when I listen to you, I see that you've been in this journey and you've used this information to get to where you are now. So it's nice to see that you worked so hard in your journey and you are where you are. And now look what you're doing. You're helping people. You're sharing your story so that others can feel inspired by what you've done. And you're not holding any punches with where you've been and what you've done. And my last comment on this is that self-forgiveness is so critical to the healing process. People who are prone to depression, and other sorts of things have this endless loop of wanting to beat themselves up and going back to all the things they've done that they feel are wrong. And those things tend to become exaggerated and highlighted and sort of obsessive in nature in terms of an intrusive thought to people. And they just want to beat themselves up constantly. And that's also a brain pattern. And it's a horrible feeling and it's a terrible place to be. And digging out of that is not an easy thing to do. So I understand and just once again admire you for
yeah. And I want to, just echo quickly, what Dr.
Awesome.
LaRosa said, learning about what actually the makeup of our brain is and what's going on and what's actually going through our ears, if you will, as we're enduring trauma, or whether it be addiction or something along those lines. And Todd, that's one of the things I think I attribute some of my success, if I've had any, through the last couple years, is to you. And you actually helped me, right? Like that osmosis education process of what you went through so many years prior kind of helped expedite my healing or my recovery. Not that I'm ever healed, right? But that's so important in the science of it, the medical components of PTSD, addiction, etc. As humans, if we could learn better about that, we can maybe recover or heal better. So I'm so excited to hear what you have to say. And I know you went through a long journey learning about what was going on with you.
Still going through it, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
of
I
course.
think Angela touched on it a little bit as well. And we've all talked about it. You go through these phases in life, normally, naturally, without any trauma or anything else, you go through phases in life. You have your adolescence and youth, and then you get into high school or college. We're seeing it with our kids, with Vanetta and I, right? And Angela and Chris, like you got your youngins. And so they're going to go through these phases, and we go through them naturally as adults. And you go through those party stages, and then you learn how to, like, okay, I got to be professional. And then you get into the later years, and then you get into the senior years, right? So there's all these transitions that you start to learn more about your body and your mind and your spirit. But now add trauma. Now add, like what Angela's talking about, with, like, alcoholism and all these different things, or like mass shootings or traumatic events and all this stuff. So for me, Chris, my journey, I started to relive again when I figured out how to walk tall again for myself, right? And the world was a different place through my eyes after seeing what I saw. And that happens probably, if I look back on all the crazy times that we've had adversity in our life, you step out of that into the light as you're starting to learn how to walk tall for yourself. Maybe you didn't have to go through therapy in a certain moment, but there's something different about the way you look at things after you go through a traumatic event, right? And unfortunately, like when you go through something crazy, like what Angela went through, what you and I went through, Chris, and what Vanetta sees and has experienced and jumped in at such an early age to help so many people that were going through craziness daily, and what she does now with her business and helping so many, like thousands of people, that are struggling mentally. There's this change every day. There's a change, and you grab onto, like what you're talking about, Angela, where you're going, okay, I'm through my second relationship, but probably each one of those you've learned more about where you're at and what you want, right?
100%.
In your life, to make sure that you're individually happy. And it goes back to that acceptance piece. Like, I have to accept who I am today, and I have to really love who I am. I have to be able to walk forward and be able to, the only way you're going to walk tall is if you truly feel like you're tall, right? And if you don't, then reach out for help.
Yep.
Because the transformation and everything that I've seen in Chris from the day one when I spoke to him, I didn't know him before. Knowing now what I know about him, like, he was probably close to what he is today, where he's fun and just this crazy dude, which in a good way. But it's exciting to see where he's transformed and the steps, and there's probably so much more that you're going to learn now, and you're learning. So yeah, I think
Yeah.
we go through those transformations, is my point.
No,
So
well,
Yeah.
thank you for saying that, and you're exactly right. Every year is different. Every anniversary is different. Every memory is perceived differently. I'm coming up here in a couple weeks on the 2-year anniversary of my experience, and I don't know how to deal with it right now. I've been struggling, frankly.
yeah,
Right. And one would think as it gets farther away, it becomes easier. And right now it's not the case for me, right? So I'm having to actively work daily to be mindful of where I'm at within the present, to make sure that I'm healthy, right? Because I
that's
don't
right.
want to slip into addiction. I don't want to go and have ideation. I don't want to have all of these things, right? Because I, like you, Angela, love life, and I have so much more to live for, and I think to bring to the world. And I'm just so happy on a daily basis to be doing things like this with the three of you. And so you know, speaking of moving forward and doing fun stuff, like you have a beautiful piece of art behind you, and you're on
Yeah.
the
Oh,
Going Commando
I'm
podcast,
so
and like,
glad you
Yeah.
mentioned that artwork because I
yes.
love it so much. And
So
it's
talk
Oh,
about you, like,
it's
you know, we've heard about the nitty gritty and maybe the dark the side of Angela, but like this is not who you are. Like you're the big
No.
smile that you're showing right now. You're the beautiful piece of art behind you. Like talk about all the cool stuff you're up to today, please.
I
yeah.
appreciate all of this and I appreciate all the conversation. And I want to talk more even offline about what you're going through, Chris, because I have some thoughts and we can talk about that. But I understand time is of the essence. So this beautiful piece of art over here behind me, it's for those who are just listening, it's a painting of my kids and I lost a baby and I reconnected with my old college pledge mom and she found out she was an artist and I wanted to honor a baby that I had lost in my second trimester, 2019, December 3rd, 2019. I wanted to create a memorial of how my family is today. So Dana painted this painting for me and then it led to Dana and I having what she does is called intuitive guidance, which is another form of therapy. But it's really, really helpful for people who are like not wanting to go the traditional therapeutic route, but want to do a little bit more digging in on like the root causes and like the empowerment piece from childhood and things like that. So Dana does that. Dana did that for me. She's the reason why I am today because I get intuitive guidance on the daily. We have a podcast together called Going Commando with Angela and Dana. And we celebrate authenticity. We share all of these stories. We use all of her wisdom. She's written amazing books on empowerment, and we kind of just riff on these ideas. We're going to have you on as a guest, Chris. You know, you guys, if you wanted to, you know, come on and hang out with us. It's we just really want to show people more of like what you guys are seeing today, like just accepting, acknowledging, taking accountability for your own happiness, your own wellness. And that's what we do. And we do it with like, you know, fart jokes and stupid things. Like we're idiots. So if you want to have a
Fart
good laugh.
jokes. That's not something we've ever heard on Walking Tall as a fart joke. So that will be a first. But you know, that's the truth, right? Like what I've appreciated about getting to know you, Angela, and seeing some of your guys' content is exactly that, right? You're authentically who each of you are. You come by it honestly. And most importantly, you celebrate it, right? Like I think that is the part that I admire most about you folks is that whether it's a bad fart joke or you're talking in depth about some intuitive healing, right? Like it's just who you folks are, and that's really who we are, right? Like, you know, Todd, you know, I know who you are, and Dr. LaRosa, I know who you are because you guys are authentic. You just come by it honestly, and there's never a question of am I getting a real person here.
Yeah.
So I
And
just love what you guys are
it's
doing.
what society really, really, really needs. You know, and people need to be authentic and vulnerable and put themselves
Yep.
out there. And we've said this before in our conversation, social media screws everything up. It
I
gives a
know.
snapshot of everything being so perfect. And, you know, you don't put up the stuff that's tough, you know, and, you know, when Todd and Chris were talking about my, you know, helping people, that started early. You know, my mom was a victim of very severe trauma. She was a domestic abuse survivor. She lived through domestic terrorism. She lived through a lot of abuse and neglect and pain and suffering. And, you know, her mental health was a struggle for her. You know, she had some depression and she had some massive self-esteem issues and self-worth issues. And she went through so much, you know, she did not have a support system in her family. And she was, you know, pretty much abandoned by her family. And she struggled her whole life, you know, and even as a little kid, you know, then she remarried and my dad was awesome and she did have a happy life. But my existence was knowing the trauma that she had gone through and wanting to be there for her and wanting to advocate for her. And, you know, so much of my life, I just wanted to jump back into her past, you know, and be that advocate for her, you know, and be that person that was there for her when nobody else was. And I think that was a big driving force with my choices in my career and why I so much, very much, you know, want to help anyone that needs it, you know. So we
It's been
all,
Awesome.
yeah.
It's exactly and truly, like, of all the guests we've ever had, we've not had a bad one, right? And there are certainly stories that are different than others, and there are certainly things we've touched on. But the reason why we've always gelled with our guests, no different than we have with you today, Angela, is because we all have the same mentality as Dr. LaRosa.
Yeah.
Like, I find myself listening to your story and wishing I could have beat up that guy who had his hands around your neck, right? Or said, hey, you don't need to snort that line. Or I wish I could have been there for Todd to not have him have gone through what he went through in Vegas, right? Or all these things. And I know you folks feel the same about me and my experiences. And so before we wrap up, Todd, I just want to hear what you have to say. This has really been such a unique episode for us to really just like lay it out there, right? And really get raw and hear some things that we all have heard of others, but like to just talk about it is pretty refreshing.
Yeah, I mean, it just sums it all up. Talking is powerful. Being vulnerable is strong. We all go through life, and I talk about, checking that checkbox off where we've been knocked down and you stood back up and you fought. And if you're a fighter and you can check that checkbox off, you can continue to check it off and keep moving forward. And that's what it's all about, trying to find happiness every single day, praying for love, and just being strong for yourself, because when you're internally happy and you're strong for yourself, you can be strong for others, and always extend that hand, just like we have at Walking Tall. So thank you, Angela, for coming on and being so vulnerable. And this was a great episode. So
Yeah.
thank you for
Thank
sharing.
you. Thank you guys.
Dr.
Can I just end with one
Well, we're
one
not
fun-
done yet. We
Oh,
still got to go
oh,
around a few
oh.
more times.
Okay.
Dr. LaRosa, you I know you have some parting words, and what are your final thoughts before we say goodbye?
One thing that we didn't get the chance to touch upon, so I do hope we'll meet again and can continue this conversation. But you mentioned your drug and alcohol use as a youngster, and in our society, the age that these kids are drinking and using drugs is mind-blowing. And there's so much to be said about the development neurologically of the brains of these kids and how the vulnerability increases due to the timing of things as well, because our brains go through a natural process a few times in our lives of pruning and regenerating itself. So we should really educate a little bit more about the dangers of drug and alcohol use in minors, because it does lead to a lot more trouble in their future.
Yeah, great point.
It's also something that you were, again, vulnerable for, to mention how your abuse and the conditions and the situation that you had to endure at such a young age sort of pushed you in that direction. And then once you did turn to drugs and alcohol, you found emotionally that it was comforting in the sense, because it allowed you to escape the pain that you were not equipped to deal with. And another important thing to consider is that, a lot of what these kids are experiencing, even if it's just on social media, the stuff on social media is so incredibly difficult for the human brain at that age to perceive and understand. It leaves people with an a feeling of an emotional crisis where they just don't know what to do. And they find themselves sad and anxious, and they don't know why. And they're watching on Instagram reels of people actually dying. And they're watching.
It's so funny. And Dr. LaRosa, like, imagine, Angela, we didn't even have social media when you
We
began your
didn't.
addiction, and
No.
that's a great point.
And the mass shootings that you have both experienced, the human brain, cannot naturally process a catastrophic, horrific, terrifying event such as that. And when we think about our kids and we think about their exposure to things, it's overwhelming for them. And so naturally the rates of anxiety and depression and everything else, for kids are on the rise, and there's a mental health crisis for our youngsters. And when you look at the correlations between mental health issues and addiction, it's very, very clear, so there's a full circle here that really needs to be targeted and discussed many, many more times over. So thank you for opening up this discussion. And, it always produces a more candid and robust discussion when you start with someone who's willing to be vulnerable and open, such as yourself. So,
I'm
what
on
else?
board. Sign me up.
I told you
will
guys
talk
you were
about
gonna
this.
love her. Like I
Let's
obviously
get
we
together
have so
for
much.
coffee.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you guys are so
I
close.
like how you say it.
Coffee. Did you hear that, Todd? Coffee.
Coffee.
Coffee. I love it. And Angelo, I think the world of you, not just because you have great taste in music, but most importantly, because your vulnerability is just so inspiring. And you are just authentically you and raw and naked and commando, right? So just to be clear, you guys don't actually go commando on the show. You're actually clothed, right?
It's a figurative.
Okay, fair.
Yeah.
No, but
You don't want to
nevertheless,
see
I
what's
want.
under here.
Okay, funny. But listen, before we sign off, I want you to give yourself some credit. Where can people find you? Where can they hear your show? Where can they connect with you? And then we'll sign off. One more thing before we go, but please let people know where they can connect with you.
Awesome. The one thing I did want to add, because that all of this, everything you guys have to say, like I feel like we are all like Todd, you and I are BFFs. Like definitely contact me after. We're gonna hang out. Vanetta, we're getting coffee for sure.
That's right.
The one thing is, with all of these experiences from our past, if you can just, and this is something that Dana taught me how to do, take the emotion out of it and try to say there was something to be gleaned from this. As horrific as it might have been for you or for somebody else, or even not even horrific, whatever, there is something to be gleaned and grown from every single experience. I don't say I'm going through a divorce. I say I'm growing through a divorce. That is my terminology I've changed and used. So you grow through all of these experiences, and that's the only way, or you don't, and you suffer mentally and whatever. So, okay. Going Commando with Angela and Dana can be found on YouTube. Please subscribe. And we say for the sake of humanity, because we're crazy like that. But yeah, please subscribe to our show, comment, like engage in the conversation. We're finishing up this awesome season talking about the chakras and how it's like practical in your life and all that good stuff. So we're also on Spotify, but for the ones who like to watch, go over to YouTube, Spotify, all the podcast places. LinkedIn, if anybody wants to talk to me about sobriety, I used to run a workshop and I can do it again. It's called So You Put Down the Substance, Now What? Because AA is not always the path for everybody, or it might be. So I am the global sponsor, if you will, if you need help. So on LinkedIn,
you're walking tall through sobriety.
Walking tall through sobriety, baby.
Love it. That's it.
That's right. So I think my handle is Angela Marie DiMarco on LinkedIn, but Todd will put it in the show notes, I guess, right? And that's a great way to reach out to me, message me, say you heard me here. I am like, you can like pick up the phone and call me and we could talk about what you're going through, because and I do have some episodes, I have some other things. I am all about being there for the next person ready, but you have to be ready. Don't call me if you're like, I don't really want to stop drinking, but I don't want to talk to you. I'm sorry, I can't. So, you have to be ready, and I'm all in on you. Okay. That's it.
You're the best.
That's awesome.
No, this has been such a great time and so fun, and to talk about something so heavy and so impactful to your life and many of lives, throughout our world, frankly, but still to smile and laugh through it. Like that's what life's all about. And I often say, like, if I'm not laughing, I'm not living. So thank you for bringing some levity to a tough conversation. And please, if you're watching us and you like what we have to say, like, subscribe, follow us, connect with all of us, frankly, on LinkedIn, Instagram, all the platforms. But most importantly, Angela, before we sign off, we always like to tell listeners 2 important words, and those are walk tall. So we always allow our guests to lead us in that. So once again, tune in next time when we have another great guest on the Walking Tall podcast. But Angela, what do you want to tell those guests?
Walk tall.
Walk tall, everybody. Have a great rest of your week.
Walk tall, everybody.
Walk tall. Walk tall.